first messy conversation of the spring quarter, um, which also happens to coincide with National Poetry Month. And so we'll be focused on poetry at this particular time and place in history. And we've got two wonderful poets joining us to share their words and thoughts. Um, I'm David Tripp. I'm one of the founding members of Messy Conversations. And I just have a couple of quick announcements for you before I hand things off to Clarence, who will be facilitating today's discussion. The first is just a quick word about what Messy Conversations is. A handful of faculty came together almost 5 years ago after the killing of George Floyd and the energizing of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we thought Antioch needed, as a community, needed a place to come together and discuss what was going on around race and racism and anti-racism, and also to do some introspection about ourselves as an institution and what our mission is and whether or not we're living up to it, and to what degree are we an anti-racist institution, and what work can we be doing that we're not doing, and so on and so forth. Messy Conversations is expanded beyond those concerns, but almost always there's a focus on these issues of race and racism and anti-racism. It's as I said, a place for the Antioch community to come together, and including Antioch partners out in the world. And so we're really glad to have you here as part of that. The planning team is always looking for good ideas, new ideas about topics for Messy Conversations. So if you happen to have topics or know of someone who you think would be a great conversationalist, please be in touch with the Messy Conversations planning team. And we'll take those things under advisory. And as very quickly, as an example of the kind of work that we try to do at Messy Conversations, next week's Messy Conversation is going to be between myself and Dr. Susana Salgado, who's at the University of Pepperdine in their Aliento program. And so in their master's in clinical psychology program, they've got a partner program in that, the Aliento program, which is the Center for Latinx Communities. And so it's really fascinating work that they're doing, looking at issues of race, looking at this particular population, and designing a program that specifically meets, trains their students to meet the needs of that community. So that should be a fantastic conversation. We hope to have many of you here for that. So with that, if you have questions, comments, please put them in the chat. We will call on you shortly. And, we have I guess, a soft close around 5 o'clock Pacific time in about an hour. But we're going to keep rolling right on through that. But we hope you stay at least until 5. And with that, I hand things off to Clarence. Thank you.
I could not march. I could not march in protest with Black Lives Matter. I could not carry another banner. I've carried the banners for women's rights, environmental rights, LGBT rights, joined the picket lines for labor unions, anti apartheid, and yes, marched with wonder for a King holiday. I could not march. I could not march to another vigil saying the names of the murdered ones. There were simply too many. I could not march in solidarity with my brothers and sisters physically, not because of mobility issues, but because of my mind. My mind is clouded with the smoldering vision of Red Summer, the violence of Bloody Sunday and every day of the week, the burnings of Rosewood, Greenwood, Wilmington, the lynchings in Elaine, reaching past every hanging tree in the Mississippi's Delta, dogs being sicked on little children, water hoses forced on the bellies of pregnant women, houses of worship bombed, shootings at Kent State, and the assassinations of Martin, Medgar, Robert, John, and every Black Panther. I could not march. I could not march because it all started in 1619 by white men who recognized the strength, abilities, and the power of Black people. It will now take the descendants of those white men to fix the residual ills and continue to assault Black people, keeping my family marching to Zion. So I surrender to the understanding of anti racism versus anti Blackness. I must do the work of healing myself, a cleansing of DNA, suppressing the need to hope, hoping that things will change. I could not march. I could not march with self proclaimed allies. Allies, tell Karen, George, and Becky to call the police. Call for police defunding, call for community policing. There will always be driving while Black, shopping while Black, jogging while Black. Oh, and bird watching while Black. And yes, barbecues with loud music, Skittles, and iced tea. Allies, will you stand after the photo ops and Twitter feeds die? Will you stand in the truth of justice and righteousness? Or will you simply return yourself under the rock of broken promises and complacency? Will you, in this right now moment, stand with me, making power to policy? Or will you just morph into the abyss of silence? I could not march. I could not march singing another protest song. I couldn't sing a freedom song, no overcoming song. I could only sing a declaring mantra from pianissimo to crescendo in the rhythm of my spirit, dancing to the cadence of my soul. I could not march. I could not march. I could not march. I'm Clarence R Williams, and the music you heard was from the late, great Max Roach, who was also a great activist as an artist. And those words I just shared were my own. I'm happy today to join you guys in celebrating National Poetry Month. And joining me in conversation and in performance are two incredibly gifted and renowned poets, writers in their own accord, both internationally known, both are well published, both are master teachers. So I invite you to visit our website to get a deeper dive into their storied careers. But we'll be chatting with them and getting more information, current and past, from them after their performances in conversation. So please welcome Traci Kato-Kiriyama and Dorthy Randall Gray. And Dorothy's laughing because I've once again mispronounced Traci's last name. So, Traci, I apologize. But we will hear from Traci first, followed by Dorothy. And hopefully I'll get your right name right.
Thank you, Clarence. I'm still kind of breathing from being so filled up from your poem, and that you led in with drumming from Mr. Max Roach. So thank you for that. It really does make me think about just what we were talking about in the pre-show here, of how there were many initiatives and efforts and pledges and promises made by universities, by corporations, by government leaders, you know, on the heels of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And by, you know, the end of 2021, 2022, there were so many of those pledges and promises and initiatives stalled, canceled, ended, rolled back, taken back. And so I have a deep appreciation for the fact that this program started then and is still going nearly 5 years later. So I want to acknowledge that, because yeah, I'll give one more example. I'm part of the Why We Can't Wait Coalition, which it was formerly the HR 40 Coalition, and it's in support of federal Black reparations. Um, and there were 219 co-sponsors for that bill, and yet it still couldn't get a House floor vote, and that was during the Biden administration. You know, so there were a lot of people that claimed energy and support, um, and are not there now. So, you know, appreciation for this space.
Thank
Um,
you.
thank you so much. Hi everybody. Thank you for, you know, allowing us to be here. Dorothy's the one with the storied career. I have a storying career. Uh, that was a very generous, awesome introduction, but I was like, I just need to
Come
give
on now.
extra respect to the notorious DRG.
How
Uh,
long has your poetry series been going on? How many years?
we're in our 27th.
Thank you.
Okay, you
Okay,
know what?
guys,
That's okay. Oh.
I need to hear some poems now, because we got people got the skirt out and we've not heard a word from Miss Traci other than
Okay. I
trying
know.
to connect my work with
It's coming.
resistance.
It's coming. Monteto, okay? Calmate.
No, that's good. Dorothy and I could go on and on together. So I'm going to read one piece that I don't usually get to read because it's longer. And I've been thinking a lot about my mom. She's going through such a decline in her health, and I think about her a lot and what she has given to me. And I am a walking waterfall, so be not surprised of tears constantly coming from me. This is after Joshua Bennett, after Rocio Carlos, on America, election eve. We were stuck on the 110 freeway traveling south. Out of nowhere, my mother tells me she was my age when she realized why she's been angry all these years. Always in Los Angeles, those deep conversations while driving, avoiding eye contact while staring into history's abyss. She'd read an article in the LA Times on childhood experiences and their lasting effect on the adult psyche. No sooner did she say aloud, "Of course, that's a no-brainer." Then did the room begin to spin, newsprint leaping off the page, turning like her stomach, from black to blue to white to red, flooding her mind with the times her temper flared at lunches with neighborhood ladies who filled her belly with their discomfort, said she was too angry and too often talking about race, said things weren't that bad, and there she goes again. And futile chats turned into argument, turning their chins in all directions away from her, leaving her alone to stare at paper plates of potato salad and potluck disdain, in a room full with the chatter of deafening silence. That article was penned in the 1980s when I was called, like she'd been called as a child in the 40s, Japs go home. I hadn't known the auto industry was crumbling on the other side of our country, but neither had any of the kids at school. or the ones near the mall with their bikes and breezy threats, or the ones in between aisles of cassette singles at the record store, always whizzing by with the same combinations of words everywhere I went. I was convinced they were from the same church or underground after-school club, given a secret dictionary of terms and tactics to show kids like me what colors we were to use within the lines they draw around us. I came to learn then of the sundown towns, my neighborhood, a brand of its own kind, where Black and brown folks get pulled over suddenly and the cars that speed past have Buy American bumper stickers all over the back. I was learning the different versions of America. The version that had my mother face those lunching ladies, but instead see FDR, see Barb's stuck in tumbleweed, see her color fade from America's mirror, see her father so broken that sometimes the vapors of sake and whiskey were the only ones his body could speak. I imagine with hope how she might have finally seen herself, a full-grown adult, when Grandpa revealed his deepest moment of pride in the time she was 2.5 years old, a miniature hurricane in dusty shoes, instructing the rest of the family they were not to leave for Grandma's just because the army had set up shop on their farmland for the war effort, scaring her older brother to tears, those soldiers positioned next to the Kato nursery sign, their rifles taking root in the gardening soil. "This is our home," she screamed. "This is our home." My mother's anger formed my bones to flow through my blood and stand ready at the back of my throat. Her voice, a generational echo chamber for the whispers who came before her, each one of the past giving permission or perhaps begging those who come next to be louder than the last. She is in her 80s now, has learned to transfer less ire onto the women of her earlier years. She's found a much bigger enemy in yet another president. She curses his name while getting out the vote postcards to our neighbors in Arizona and Florida, with great fury and cursive that looks like flowers yelling. I wonder if she ever gives her anger credit for the compassion that spews out of her mouth. Like a few years prior, half conscious and losing blood after routine surgery, using what little energy she had to lament for those without health care and to continue cursing the president. She is not only my link to our family's trauma, but is the courage unlocked from deep inside our ancestral sinew, carries all the reasons for my reasons, the heat in my blood, these hands that knew to break the flesh-colored crayon in half and move on, these lungs that helped me yell at that white man for cheating against me in a child's game at Circus Circus when I was 4 years old, these feet that leapt up from my desk to disrupt our 11th grade government class, arms outstretched to the teacher too often with articles our textbooks refused to teach. My mother's mouth that lives through this mouth, so full of fire, there is little room left for air, and I cannot keep it shut. And when it is time for her to look back for the last time, I will be there to remind her the best of her fire remains the strongest of my colors. And I thank the universe and all versions of heaven that her anger is evergreen. Thank you so much. Thanks for letting me share that. I have the extreme honor and pleasure of passing it now to the wonderful, the amazing, magnificent, the OG, the notorious DRG, Dorothy Randall Gray.
Thank you, Traci. And I want to thank you for sharing your heart and your soul and your mother with us in such a meaningful way and making that connection. There are so many ways that we can all connect. And one of the ways that I like to connect is through writing and through art, and using these powerful mechanisms to access and helping people and youth to access the power that lies within them. Because when we access this inner power through our poetry and our art and our music, then we give rise to something that cannot be destroyed. And we have to move in that direction so that we are holding on to what makes us precious and what is truly our secret weapon: writing, music, art. Precious, thank you. In the writing classes that I teach, I teach people about collecting seeds. And so I just want to share some seeds from your work with you before I read. And the seeds I collected, she was a hurricane in dusty shoes. I'm a walking waterfall. And my mother's mouth that lived through my mouth. So thank you for that. And that will give rise to so many other words. Thank you. When I think about resistance, I think about Audre Lorde's quotation that the personal is political, and the wars that are being fought, not only in Jerusalem, but also in the Sudan and all places all over the world that do not get mentioned. And so I would like us all to think about all the wars, not just one or two that get the most publicity, and thinking about the wars on women and women's bodies. So I'd like to read two works. One is called My Body. My body is a woman who dreams of Native children buried beneath mission schools in Canada. My body is a woman in Tuvalu whose South Pacific rising waters have turned her front lawn into an ocean. My body is a tree in Brazil destroyed to make room for McDonald's cattle and hamburgers. My body is a pregnant 13-year-old child bride in Syria. My body is a 9-year-old girl in Somalia whose genitals suffer mutilation while the family holds a celebration. My body is a woman in flames, burned with approval for an honor killing in India. My body is a Salvadorian woman waiting months for freedom in the border city of Reynosa. My body is a Haitian woman waiting 2 years in a Florida immigration detention center. My body is a Haitian woman waiting 2 years in a Florida immigration detention center, watching Ukrainian women on TV being welcomed with open arms, homes, jobs, and families. My body is a woman of power rendered powerless by those in power. My body is a woman watching you drive around looking for another neighborhood to gentrify. My body is a woman whose student loans have never been forgiven. My body is a woman whose iPhone tracks her steps as she races to another step, another state for an abortion. My body is a woman trafficked and traded and aided by airport personnel. My body is a 17-year-old juvenile in detention, waiting to see if she'll be tried as an adult. My body is a mother of a son, daughter, killed for driving while Black, sitting in her jail cell while Black, being in a car with his 4 children while Black, sitting in his apartment while Black, sleeping in her bed while Black, eating Skittles while Black. My body is one of 100,000 Black women missing last year who nobody's looking for because they don't have blonde hair. My body is a woman who cleans your house, wipes your baby, cooks your meals, and you still don't know her last name. My body is a woman who can't afford to feed the children she was forced to have. My body is a woman working 2 jobs, mothering her children and mothering her own mother. My body is a woman who lost her job, lost her home, and lost her mind. My body is a teen victim who killed her rapist and was ordered to pay a fine to his family. My body is a woman serving more time than her abuser. My body is a woman who says, get your laws off my body and put some laws on the books. Get my wage out of your pocket. Get your righteousness off my rights. Get your foot off my future. Get your dick out of my destiny. Get your knee off my humanity because I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. My next piece is one that's part of a series that I'm working on called Olakunda and the New Black Goddesses. It takes place in the past, present, of the future. When they came, when they came, when they came, when they came with barbed wire words and eyes that seared more than saw, and tongues that coiled snake-like, tasting fear they created, blood that flowed before it did, throats that they would pierce once people believed them, knives they'd sharpen their hearts on and call it love. When they came with pretend and promises, mouths filled with we and us, dancing between not and the not ever, coming not to kill, but to conquer, to banish the holy, to tarnish the silver sacred, to chastise chalices of the deeply held, to wound the wounded, to topple the highest, to trample fruits they could not eat and name them poison, to feed dreams and dogs who turned into wolves. Howling at the purple moon when they came, when they came. They came cloaked in kindness, fingers curled with concepts, ruby rings rife with rhinestones and cardinal feathers, diamonds spit from earth's belly in disgust, each facet blinding with 1,000 truths, one for each day, each hour, each severed hand reaching for more. Each song turned sour, each land laid bare, each river dry, each island drowned, each language gone, each bird unborn, each cloud unrained, each light turned dark, each kiss a cry when they came, when they came. 2. Olakunda refugied herself from the stars, caught the crescent moon between her legs, and let it feast. Black holes, stardust, and Milky Way. Later, she flew to Earth's skin, singing and saturated and satiated. She wrapped her wings in a Ziploc bag, sexed herself to birth a daughter, and sexed her men so they would birth sons. She lived in a tree or the ocean when the tides were ripe. Consecrated robes surrounded her body, fabric spun from sanctified silk worms bred for her purpose. Her name, chanted a secret number of times, could heal bones and mend broken souls. She spoke in earth and astral languages, held counsel with hummingbirds, and soothed herself with mermaid massages at high tide on moonlit nights. Believers gathered at every new moon to suck knowledge and love from her toes and catch her ecstatic exhalations in jars of rose petals. They braided pearls into silky hairs of the velvet V between her legs and anointed her dreadlocks with baby tears, gingerly oiled, and juice from flowers that blossomed every 100 years. She knew the conqueror's knowing, heard cowbells, death knells in the unquiet sky, heard the wind grit its teeth and crickets lose their song, could smell weapons in their words and sneers behind the smiles when they said, "We come in peace." It was the day the river caught fire and the sideways rain did nothing to quell it. The day hours shortened themselves before stopping altogether when they came, when they came. 3. Olakunda had history carved on all her skins, algebra, Aramaic, and Insibidi ancestral teachings tattooed on her scalp, head wrapped until the hair grew back. She waited in the knowing, scrolls swallowed, music memorized, knives and gardenia petals tucked beneath her breasts, eggs planted inside ovary walls, family faces painted on fingernails, fists hidden in fists ready to fight. When they came killing griots and poets, any bearer of what was, any tellers of the possible could be, any woman who talked to trees, any dog who wouldn't wag a welcome. They made flags of her silks, banished her in rags and burlap, dried fruit and almonds, flat bread and water in a goatskin bag with feet tied to turtles. They dropped her off a mile from the edge of nowhere. The ocean overflowed. Her tree screamed when they chopped it down. Her people defeated not by force, but by falsehood. No one had taught them how to lie, and they forgot they knew how to live forever. Olakunda stood at the edge, rock still, listening to the earth's discontent, the turmoil between its skin, the tremors and the stream and heated blood threatening to surface, the murmurations of birds overhead, the sudden silence. Head held high, wounds, bleeding blue-green algae, tattered cloths circling her legs. She turned around to face them. You think you have won. Prepare to bury your dead and that illusion. She walked away, dreaming of the next world she'd inherit, singing the song she came with, smiling and pregnant with the future. That's it.
That's it. That's your declaration. Dorothy, that last piece reminded me of the now, this moment with what's going on in our world. You
It's
know,
the
when they
past, present, of
came,
the
when they
future.
came,
Yes.
when they came, because they're here, they're here, they're here.
Mhm.
Anywho, Sir Beth, are there any audience questions before I do a deep dive into my questions?
There's appreciation in the chat, and I think maybe people will have some time to type in now if they can, and we can keep going, Clarence, and then I'll add some pieces.
Okay. Well, I would just like to first of all thank you both for both of those offerings or all of those offerings. Um, Very inspiring. And inspiration is what I want to ask you about. Um, what is your process and what inspires you to write a given piece, especially since our theme today is resistance? What drives you, inspires you, incites you to write a piece that is a resistance of sort? Traci, you want to start?
Yeah. Let me say my name aloud. Kato-Kiriyama. Me saying my name aloud is a form of resistance. um,
Especially resisting the way Clarence Williams pronounced
no,
it
no, no.
earlier.
No. In that, there was a time when I was a child where I flattened my name. I did not roll the R. I said Kiriyama. And that was before I attached my mom's last name, Kato, to Kiriyama. And it's been my name has been a process of reclamation and honoring. And I do think that that comes from, all the people around me who are my influences in that. I think for writing, um, my my personal charge, and my commitment to writing is to make sure that it is honestly coming from a need to work out some question that I have, a need to write into some memory that I'm trying to excavate, um, and to be honest, to really remember that idea of the political is personal, the personal is political. And so to me, there's no, oh, this is my fluffy poetry. And I mean, sometimes I'll tell myself, okay, I'm just going to do a day of silly haiku, you know, but it's still this idea of needing to be absolutely honest. Um, and, and in that, I think comes deeper, expressions of truth. Um, so it ends up being both personal and political, and kind of the sort of relationship therein. um yeah, I'm inspired a lot by not just other writers but activists who've grown me and who continue to raise me. um and the material is all around us, so it's in everything we read and everything we see and everything we experience. And so yeah, just trying to really listen very carefully to that, to those voices.
What
Yeah,
say you, Notorious DRG?
yeah, that's inspiration is all around us. It's in everything. It's in a lot of it is in the untold and the unseen, and particularly women whose voices have not been recognized or imagined enough. And sometimes just thinking about these women creates some fertile ground for creating something. And think about women and nature. Nature is one of my biggest inspirations, and I'm a tree person. And one of the poems I wrote was about when I remember and having a reading about having been a tree in two different past life readings, and how I learned how to give from a tree, and that has carried me on through ages. And so I connect with the nature of trees and the fact that they're being destroyed as this planet is being destroyed, as the waters that the trees are supposed to suck up are being destroyed. So everything that's personal is political, is environmental. And those things inspire me when I think about the waters rising in Tuvalu. And instead of having a front lawn, having in the ocean because the land is sinking. And now the front lawn, they can't grow anything on their land because the water is salt water and nothing grows in it. So it all becomes connected, and there's an allness in everything. I think about that. I think about about women's voices, and one of the pieces that among the many pieces that I started, I know Traci and I have pages and notes and everything about things we want to finish at one point. One of the things that I started writing was about Mary and the 13 forgotten female disciples, and what they did and what they looked like and what their voices might have been like, and so and things of that nature. The voices of a woman who was hanged, and what her baby would have to say to her as the baby grows up in a hostile area. So the creative energy comes from those voices that I think need to have some air and some listening to, and my students inspire me too. And I love teaching, and so when I hear that they've dug down and they have come up with something that surprised them, that is so inspirational. There's nothing like that in the world. To know that you turn the light on, to help turn the light on in somebody's past or present, and you're able to affect some kind of change that they can carry on with. So inspiration is all around.
So that really, I know the answer to what I'm going to ask, like any lawyer would know, Dorothy Randall Gray. But I'm going to ask Traci, what is your physical process? Like, is there an environment that really sets off your process? Or do you create an environment that you kind of curate a path forward to your process?
Mm.
Maya Angelou used to rent a room at a hotel in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where she kept a bottle of Johnny Walker and a Bible, and paid the maids and staff not to disturb that room. And when she was inspired, she would just go down the street to that hotel and spend her time writing. So, do you have a physical process, Traci?
Yeah, I love that question because I do think writing is so physical. Um, I work in multiple disciplines and intertwine those often. So working in the areas of performance and theater, and writing, of course, kind of being foundational to all of that. The body, the way the body moves, the way my body feels is incredibly important in all of those spaces. And I do a lot of work with my voice too. So I think that there's something about, for me, singing and dancing, and just moving. And sometimes moving uh, out of spaces that I anticipate in terms of, okay, I'm going to write this thing. And then realizing maybe in the process of that, okay, this thing that I was going to write, it started as a poem, but I actually think this belongs as a scene of dialogue. This word, this concept, I think actually should be expressed through movement, right? This thing I'm writing, this series is I need to put an end to it, but it's still flowing. Okay, let me go and paint. So I do feel, and then painting itself feels very much like movement. It's definitely movement. Um, and so yeah, I try to just allow myself a lot of time, so that I can, kind of move. The more and more I age, I'm like, just everything like slower, less rushing, no rushing, um, time, no meetings on that day that I really need to get to it. Um, so yeah, I think it's all very physical. It's yeah, a lot about being able to even like be in one place and just sit in silence, in stillness. Um, I do a lot of reading, of course. I'm always reading multiple books at the same time. And then there's a certain point where like I fill up and I need to just sit and be still. Um, but then that's movement too. That's physical. And concentrating on breath and like running and that being meditative and letting things come. So just allowing for many opportunities for flow. Um, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned movement and the way the flow of ideas can flow into from one thing into another. I surprised myself when I was writing something and I was working with the high school students at Compton High, and I was doing something and I used my teaching to like infuse a little bit of the injustice and everything that they don't teach in schools. And so I was doing that and I said, well, why don't I do, maybe we can do a tree. Well, maybe we can do something. Well, there was an injustice. Well, maybe we can build something around it. Next thing I know, I'm doing an installation that is in the middle of the Japanese American National Museum, with barbed wire and grass carpet and a tree of injustice. And I collected photos from people who had been interred, the Japanese people who had been interred, and combined it with young Black men who had been killed and put them on leaves. And then I didn't know I was doing an installation. I built this replica of a concentration camp that they kept the Japanese in, and I had people walk through it on a trail of tears because the Native Americans had been displaced. It was the whole thing about displacement. But I started out thinking about displacement and how I wanted the students to understand how displacement has happened in all corners of the world, with the Africans displaced from Africa, the Native Americans, the people being removed, evicted from their land to build the Dodger Stadium. The idea of displacement led me to an entire huge thing that took up the lobby of the museum. I hadn't planned it, but that's where I was guided. So a lot of the energy comes from where the guidance comes from, and that's from spirit, and connecting with spirit and listening to whatever wants to come to you in the morning and laying still and writing down whatever comes to and whatever comes through. So it may be in writing. When after George Floyd was killed and the pandemic was on, I could not write. I was too angry, too anxiety filled, too filled with so much rage. I couldn't write. And I learned how to do printmaking, and so I learned to print. I did printmaking, and I had not called myself a print artist, but suddenly I'm doing prints. So I never know where it's going to come from or where it's going to lead to. But when it comes, I've got thousands of pieces of paper as witnesses to testify to all the different ideas that have flowed through and continue to flow through whatever whatever direction they decide they want me to take with them.
I'm laughing because I know Dorothy Randall Gray, and I won't tell anyone how long, because then you won't believe I'm 22 years old if I tell you how long I've known her. But those little sips of paper, I had to marvel of her saying that, because I'm so used to her walking around the world with a little book of some kind, little small indiscreet book, and she's
Oh,
constantly writing down words or thoughts, or well, I have no idea what she's writing down, but she always has that little companion tucked away somewhere to put those thoughts on everywhere she goes around the world. But I'm just chuckling at the thought of that. But I can relate to what you just said, Dorothy, in a personal way, because during the George Floyd, I call it the incident, I was enraged, and I entered the first messy conversations talking about how angry I was as a Black man in America. And it was during that time that Stephen Rains, who you know, who was also invited to join us today, but he is in Paris, which I'm very jealous of. But he is an Antioch graduate, and I took a workshop from him during that time. And he said, okay, everyone's in their feelings about what's going on. Let's write about it. And that's where the piece that I shared today, I Could Not March, came from, because I watched the marching and I physically could not go out and march, but I had a point, had to turn off the watching of the marching, of the marching, of the marching, and the marching everywhere, and the marching. And it just gave me more rage. So I can fully relate to being, I have the opposite reaction. You could not write, and I all I did was write during that time. But oddly enough, when I went through 2 bouts of cancer, I could not write anything. I wrote one poem about not being able to sleep in the 3-year journey of that cancer. And you would think that journaling would come easy if you are in that situation, but I couldn't put pen to paper. I could not write anything. It was a different personal form of resistance, I guess. And speaking of resistance, is it really the resistance that drives the poetry? Or is it, as you expressed earlier, both of you, um, is it more um, environmental driven, or is it the world moving around your sphere that drives you to write about resistance? And or do you even see your work as resistance? And if so, and how do you use that?
I think I'm driven by curiosity, and I'm driven by one of my greatest pet peeves, which is assumption.
mm,
Um, I feel like at least half of the writing I do is because I want to have more of a conversation with so and so about this thing that they said, which is a clear assumption about Los Angeles or my family or this city, the country. There's so many things that I find I'm like, oh, we need to talk more about this. And I have a whole section that begins my book about being an adult without child. There are so many assumptions that come with that, with anybody related to having children or not. And what does that mean for a queer cancer survivor, who was given 2 months to figure out eggs and embryos? So there's so many conversations to be had, and that to me stem from that place of wanting to challenge assumptions and open up a door for conversation. um so in terms of seeing my work as resistance, absolutely. I see it as memory gathering work,
Mm.
and in gathering memories, how oftentimes those are very heartbreaking, and hard to face. And then so poetry writing, I feel like allows for a little bit of a soft cushion sometimes to face it and to express it. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Dorothy,
cushion.
you have something to add before we open
Yeah,
up the room?
I don't, when I think about resistance, I don't think about, let me write a resistance piece, I think about like, okay, let me give some more money to AOC, let me do that. I mean, I like to do that, but in terms of the poetry and the writing, I get to that place that's inside, that's a heartbreak place, that place where it's trying to break us, it's trying to take your souls away, it's trying to make you think that you're not who you are, it's trying to make you think that you don't have any power. All of those things that are being imposed on people, particularly now or just all throughout the ages. And think about those kinds of things. And one of the things that Traci mentioned was about wanting to have a conversation with about certain ideas or some concepts or something somebody said. And somebody wrote in the chat about being human and remembering to be human. And I think one of the biggest resistance, one form of resistance we can have is like having conversation, sitting down, having face to face conversation with people, not on the cell phone, but having a real face conversation, taking time to talk with people, taking time to really look at somebody's face and share ideas, taking time to walk by a river and share the day and share the sun and share the energy that's around. So there are lots of conversations that can be had, and some of them we need to take more time to do because there are so many things that are trying to divide us, that try to make us think that we're not human, that we're not connected, and we really are. So when we take that time to make a call and spend 10 minutes, with somebody, even on the phone, and just thinking about you, let's get together and have some breakfast, have some whatever. More human time is an antidote to all the things that are happening to make us feel unhuman and things that are a reflection of the evil that's coming down. And I say evil because it is evil. When you don't think about people or care about their feelings or how they're going to survive, that's just plain evil. So the antidote is, hey, let's figure out ways we can be more human. What does that look like? How can we do? How can we keep our humanness when everything around us is inhuman and insane? What do we do with that? So sometimes it's just like, hey, I'm in conversation, sending a little note. Hey, how about writing a note? Writing a note with a pen and a stamp and sending it to somebody, writing something, say, hey, I'm thinking about you. I love that line that you wrote. I saw you on Zoom. I'm thinking about you because the sun is shining and I'd love to see the shine in your face. Yeah, human stuff, human stuff. That's the movement.
Well, thinking of two humans that are waiting patiently to respond to us,
Yes.
let's have Anne provide her comments and questions.
I think it's Annie. Annie, would you
I'm
like to
sorry.
share your question?
I
Oh,
guess I should put
sure.
on glasses. Huh?
My question is, um, I'm a poet myself, and I really often struggle with feeling like my words aren't enough and my voice isn't important. Like if people aren't listening, um, how how can this do anything? Poetry as resistance is a wonderful thing in theory, but I sometimes feel like it's not. Obviously, it's not enough on its own, but it's not um, something that I always feel like I can do. And I'm wondering if either of you have ever felt that way. And if so, how do you continue on past it?
I
You want
think
to go?
if you just use Mary J. Blige uh, school of encouragement. It was worth it. Let me work it. It was worth it. Let me work it. The fact that you took time to write something down is worth it. Just worth it. Don't worry about who it might affect or will anybody listen? Yes, of course your poetry will be listened to. Assume that it will. If there's one assumption that you want to have is that, hey, this poem deserved to be written. If that's your only assumption, then like go with that and work it, and know that the fact that you took time to write it down and express something, that's invaluable already.
Yeah, I think about like service and something that Bill Watanabe, who was the executive director for Little Tokyo Service Center, which is a community development organization in Little Tokyo. I always remember him talking about like whenever we're coming up with these ideas for programs, to check it against need. Like, what are the needs? What are the actual needs? And I think like how I apply that to an individual writing, to show up for something. It's like to be very honest and specific about your need to write to this thing, and then your need to share it, to express how you are showing up or how you want to show up. And then to take that and go to an open mic, to go to an event that Dorothy or I are hosting, and sign up for the open mic and and be there with this piece that you needed in the very first moments. You just simply needed to write it. And when it's that, honest and specific to your experience and those needs, I feel like there, like Dorothy's saying, there's always going to be people that will want to connect with you and will hear it and will see you. And yeah, to not apologize, like for what you simply needed to write. um I don't, is that answering your question? Is there more that we can
Yes.
offer?
Thank you. That totally answered my question. And I guess I'll go pick up a pen once this is over. So thank you.
It looks like this, remember?
I've got a couple around. I'll take a peek for them.
Yes.
Have at it. David, you were next, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Clarence. My, I don't know, comment, question, a little bit of both. Dorothy's already started to respond to that. And it's just, my increasing sense that perhaps the most important thing we can do these days is to be human, and to really explore that being of human and humaning, and as a form of resistance, that just being a human being. I often tell my students that there's an infinite number of ways to be a human being, not the two or three that they tell us are ways to be human, but it's infinite. So, how do we do that? And so that's a word of appreciation for how both Traci and Dorothy have shown up with us today in your stories and your words and your poems. So thank you for that. And then the question attached to it is, just whatever random thoughts you have about how do we encourage those who don't have that relationship with themselves, don't understand themselves as creative, or struggle to express themselves. What kind of encouragement can we give those of us?
Yeah. I have a piece that I often share about this question of like, are you an artist? And what that means. What does that mean when we start to break down these terms and categories? I think, especially like in academic institutions and the world of academia, there can be a lot that gets caught up in title and certification and degrees, and then publishing and what tier level of that publishing journal, and so um I was listening to Joy Harjo speak about this, in that like, if she had waited to write, if she had waited till she knew all the forms, all the rules, all the things that a writer poet must do, she would have never written a poem. And so I think we have to have more conversations of permission and allowance to just validate the fact that every single person in this room comes in with all kinds of life experience and opinions and philosophies, visions, dreams. And then along with that, the generations, like, we pull in, we bring in, we invoke, we evoke all of the people that have raised us, all of our ancestors, everyone who's come before us, whether we know their names or not. And so it's simply about, hey, what's your name? What's the story of your name? Can you start there? Can you write something about that?
Mhm.
Here's a form that I like. Do you want to try it? And just having ways in which to break it down more and understand that a lot of my favorite writers, especially maybe before this age in the world, they came from writing within their experience, not in school. They came out just guns blazing with their pens because they had to write. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It still doesn't matter to us that a lot of these folks that we love to this day, we don't think first, where did they go to school? And so it's with the same thing here. I want to hear the work. I want to hear the story. I want to hear the poem. I want to hear the writing. That's all that matters to me. I want to hear the human. It's exactly
Yes,
that.
exactly. I love David's word. I don't, did you mean to invent that word, David? Humaning? I love that word. You
But
know,
it's got to be a verb, right? It's got to be.
yeah, I'm humaning. Yeah, a lot of the work that I have done is exactly with people who did not know they had the kind of voice that lived inside them, didn't feel worthy of even writing or putting something down on paper, didn't feel like they could write something that anybody would want to listen to. So whether I've been working with men at the at a men's jail in Lancaster, or I work now with young girls who are in juvenile detention. They're 15, 16 years old. They're not valuing themselves, and their words. And so, whatever the population is, I love um, inviting the words out and giving some simple kinds of clues, simple prompt. Example, I did a prompt that it went from some of the homeless populations that I worked with on Skid Row, and I asked the question: if your soul was a city, what would it be called? What would it look like, and what would it be like to live there? That became a whole movement with the LAMP community, the mentally ill, homeless on San Pedro. They built a whole thing around it, and because each one of them could realize, hey, I've got a soul, I've got something to give, I have something to start from, because that's the idea, start from where they already are and validate and recognize what is already in their bodies and their minds, and surprising, fabulous, wonderful things will come out. And that's the joy, and that's joy of teaching, the joy of living, joy of seeing these, listening to other poets. Wow, listen to that. Wow. I think we poets amaze each other by what comes through. So yeah, getting the unspoken spoken. That's what we can do as poets, as teachers, as listeners. The gift of listening is one that invites so much, so very much.
I so love that, the gift that it is. Earlier, Dorothy, you mentioned, I'm sorry, Traci, you mentioned about carrying memories. And I was reading something about black hair, and I have some. So they say that hair carries memories, and I really subscribe to that. So I had the piece that I read earlier was licensed for a new book that comes out next month called If Black Hair Could Talk.
Mm.
So, from a spiritual standpoint, Dorothy, you know that I'm very keen to hair, locks especially, carrying certain memories, experiences, and the spirit of our souls, really. So that's why I, at one point in my life, shaved off my hair, and to rid myself of the potential of carrying the memories of certain situations in my life. And of course, all this is new since then, but of course, there are a whole lot more memories in these locks than the previous ones from 2000 and 5, 6. Anyway, enough of that trivial. Do you have other questions?
We have a comment by Denise. Denise, would you like to share?
Sure. First, I'd like to say hi to Dorothy because we worked together at Urban Possibilities many years ago.
Hey,
Yeah,
how you doing? All right.
thank you, Dorothy and Traci, for your words today. I'm not a poet, and I tend not to write.
Not yet. You're maybe you don't think of yourself as a poet yet.
Well, I do multimedia stuff with theater, and what I like to do is, because so many people say such amazing things, I like to gather what they have done and put it together in a presentation, so I don't have to write anything because it's already been said beautifully by people that I see. And so that's the kind of work I do with something called Race Relay, and including visual clips of what's going on in the zeitgeist of our society. And at one point, I thought maybe I'd do something called Race Relay Resistance, doing it again, but somehow resisting it. And again, stopping calling myself a writer, because I'm not trying to create words in a piece by themselves, but taking other people's words and putting them together in an amalgam. However, I saw something about Mary McLeod Bethune on Facebook yesterday. And so I was moved to write. I don't tell everybody this, but my father was Mary McLeod Bethune's valet, and he worked his way through Bethune-Cookman College being her valet. And Mrs. Bethune wrote my father's recommendation letter to W.E.B. Du Bois, which is how he got into Morehouse at Atlanta University. When I wrote that on Facebook, I got so many comments. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Blah, 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 blah. Save those papers, which of course I have all these years. But, it's like, well, I've written. I wrote something inspiring. I wrote something about my history. And I don't go around telling it to everyone, because how do you just sort of casually get that into conversation? Okay. But the point is that I did write something that inspired people, and that made me feel good. And so I'm just rethinking how I define myself as an artist, and as I define myself as a writer. I have written some plays, but that's not how I make my living. I teach documentary filmmaking. I do other things. But I just wanted to thank you again today for making me think about realizing as an artist that there are many different ways that I am an artist. And there are many different ways that I can inspire people, not just through my race relay process, but just by communicating. So thank you again very much.
Okay, well, you're welcome, but someone who knows you and having you on Messy Conversations in the past, we know you're really underselling yourself. All the documentaries you've produced, all the plays and the race relays alone, we know you can write, Denise Hamilton. You are a writer indeed, no matter what form it takes. So we don't want to ever hear that in this space. What we want to hear is more about race relay in the future. And I think it's brilliant that you want to do a new edition of Race Relay Resistance. I can't wait for that, because Race Relay, as we know, is brilliant. It's one of the best examples of anti-race work that we've seen in this city and beyond. So, thank you so much for joining us today, and you will come back.
I'd like to see
Anyone
your
else?
documentaries.
She's done many. I don't know why she's sitting up in here being a professor of filmmaking telling us this, but anyway, any other questions, comments?
Zoe, you dropped a comment in the chat. Would you like to speak to it?
Oh,
Zoe?
sure. I just Dorothy's comment about the value of being a listener kind of made me want to get back out to open mics. I've been focusing so much on like, well, you know, like my own past experiences with that, or like, do I have new stuff I want to like, kind of like, what do I want to get out of it? But I hadn't really thought about so much about the value of me being there, listening to others, and how that could, you know, that could end up inspiring me. Absolutely. So this has been fantastic. Thank you, Clarence, for organizing this and for inviting me. Um, Absolutely wonderful timing. Thank you.
On that note,
Pleasure.
on that note of feeling like attending things, I just want to plug, I think we put it in the chat earlier. We have an event tomorrow in Little Tokyo. And so it's the Tuesday Night Cafe series. We are in our 27th year. I was a 24-year-old young theater artist, writer when we started, and it's still going. And we, you know, are especially excited to have Asian American and local LA artists. Those are two big priority areas for me. So we have tomorrow, I don't usually curate anymore. I passed the baton many years ago in terms of the curating, but I'm going to be hosting a special night tomorrow related to National Poetry Month, and we're going to have two round robins. Dorthy, you've got to come do this with us at some point. And we have wonderful poets coming tomorrow, S. Pearl Sharp from the World Stage. We have Noriko Nakata and Louis-Yvette Resto representing many things, including women who submit. We have Chiwon Choi, Writ Large Projects, who is sharing his rounds with a youth poet, Nico Dini, and a poet I've never met before, but read some of their work, Anna Kai, who I'm very excited to present as well. So it's in Little Tokyo. It's free. It's outdoors, 7:30. And I know Dorothy's always got something to plug, so I want to
No,
hear it.
I've been unplugging. I did 3 poetry readings in the last week and a half, so but yeah, I just want to plug the fact that I'm going to be actually starting a new writing series probably in the next 2 weeks. And if I send it to Clarence, maybe he can get it to everybody. But I teach, I have series that I do that are writing about 5 sessions, and so I do a lot of writing and wellness. I'm working on a series with a somatic therapist doing expressive writing for healing. And then I have my own creative writing. I always have a different theme, and I've never repeated the same theme in the many years I've been teaching. So I'm plugging that and plugging the International Women's Writing Guild that I've been a part of for a million years. They're having their conference in New York, and all kinds of things are coming up. So yeah, Dorothy Randall Gray is where I am. It's where my poetry book, Sharing the Same Sky, is sold. And I'll be sending things to Clarence, who can send them out to all you messy people, and I hope to stay in touch. Yeah.
We will get messy and place those events and those items on our website.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, Zoe, who just had the previous question and comments, would you drop in the chat your poetry website that you just turned me on to a few weeks ago? I'd really appreciate it. I'd love for other people to know about it, because it was my first time learning of that particular site and also connecting with your poetry. So please share that with us in the chat if you would. And if anyone else is affiliated with anything happening for National Poetry Month, please drop it in the chat so we can perhaps curate some of that for our website as well. Okay, any other questions? Because I've got a simple one to ask the panel.
Go ahead, Clarence.
Who is your most inspiring or inspired choice, living or, unalive? Who is that particular poet or writer? I mean, if you wanted to just have lunch with someone in particular who is a poet or a writer, who would that person be?
Um, of an infinite list that I'm sure everybody feels there's an infinite list. I go
I
with
just
what
want
comes first.
one.
Yeah,
I have a
I'm gonna
long
go with
list
the
too,
one
but
that's coming first.
for
And
me, yes, the first one.
yeah, I would do anything to have lunch and read back and forth with Sequoia, Olivia Mercier, who passed away earlier this year. Um, I love her work. Midnight Rainbow. You can read her work there. She is in two collections, I believe, that are anthologies that I think are just classics. Um, from poets from the world stage. Um, she wrote a piece for Go Tell Michelle, which is a collection of writing from Black women across the country before Michelle Obama came into office um, as the first lady. So yeah, Sequoia is just, deeply missed, was one of the mothers of the world stage, amazing writer. That's who I would ask to have lunch with today.
I have to tell
DRG.
3 people. I want 3 people to come and all have lunch and dinner, you know, and they would be Sonia Sanchez, Zora Hurston, and Toni Morrison.
Mm.
And I won't say a word. I'll just listen.
Okay, well, I have a long list, but 2 of your people, Dorothy, I have been in the presence of on multiple occasion, thanks to my former boss, James Baldwin. But for me, I would have to say it would be Paul Laurence Dunbar, because he was one of the first poets outside of Langston Hughes that I ever remember hearing his words. And even though the dialect was very, very challenging, I just thought that he wrote at a time that had to be extremely filled with some kind of resistance all around him. So I think that would be my number one. Um, Although I have a long list too, but I only asked for one. So are there any final thoughts or announcements? Because I don't see any more questions coming up.
Yeah, if we could stop off with David.
Yeah, just me again,
As I
reminding
can
you.
see, I can't really see the chat, so I have to rely on you guys.
It's, just want to remind everyone to come back next week and bring a friend. Support Messy Conversations as best you can if it's meaningful to you. And next week, we've got Dr. Susana Salgado from Pepperdine University's Aliento program, which is the Center for Latinx Communities. It's their graduate program in clinical psychology with a special focus on the Latinx community. I became aware of it through some reading I was doing maybe a year ago and was just blown away by the way that they've organized that program and the offerings that they're giving their students. So I'm excited to be in conversation with her next week and hope to see many of you back for that.
Okay, any last thoughts from our panel?
Just thank you so much for this space. I hope there are ways to stay connected. If you do come out to a TNC, please say hi. And yeah, hope to hear some of your writing as well.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you
Clarence.
for the
Thank you.
invitation. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
Did
I
you?
was just saying thank you, and
Okay.
thank you,
Thank
Dorothy.
you for the invitation. Thank you, Clarence, and thank you for the Missy staff. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share my work. This is the first time that I have read the whole 3-part Olakunda series to a group. So I just want to let you know I really think you're special. So uh, yeah, I working on more goddesses, and I hope to share them with you in the future. And I'd love to maybe even come to Antioch and do a guest writing thing, guest series with your students, whoever they are. Okay, but I'm so pleased that people came out. Thank you, Denise, and David, and everybody else. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you my writing companion, my poetry companion, Traci, Kiriyama. Thank you.
Love you, Dorothy.
Love you back.
You guys didn't mention your books. Like Dorthy Randall Gray, your book is legendary. Can you just like
Oh,
quickly tell us about your books?
okay, yeah, I have a the one of the large books, one of the main books that I wrote was it actually put out of print because of the publishing industry, but you can still get it on Amazon, and that's Soul Between the Lines. And my book of poetry, Sharing the Same Sky, is available at my website, DorothyRandallGray.com. I used to have it sold on Amazon, but every time people order it, and Amazon sends me a notice saying somebody ordered your book, when I write back and ask them what the address is, they say, "Oh, we don't have an account for you." So things have gotten really screwed up with Amazon. So you can order it directly from my website. It's Sharing the Same Sky, book of poetry, and and yeah, and that's it. There's a new book in the works, so stay tuned for that, and I'll let you know whatever wonderful things are coming up with next. Okay.
What about you, Traci?
Yeah, there are two recent anthologies. One just came out at the top of April called The Gate of Memory. Um,
Yeah.
it's an anthology of Nikkei poets. Nikkei means out of Japan. It's a diaspora term. So it's Nikkei poets who are descendants of the American concentration camps. So that just came out. And then there is a Penguin Classics anthology called The Literature of Japanese American Incarceration that came out last year. So those are available. And then my book, Navigating Without Instruments, Poetry, Micro Essays, Notes to Self. I've been touring a lot with it the past 3.5 years. Would love to come to Antioch to do something with it. I've been, teaching a lot and speaking a lot with it about transgenerational trauma and delight. Sort of that's kind of like the center root anchor of a lot of the material in here. Yeah, you can call your favorite bookstore, see if they have it. If they don't, they can order it and you can pick it up, or you can get it anywhere online.
I'll be sharing the name of the anthology that I'm going to be in, and it comes out in June. I can't think of the name. It was put out by the International Women's Writing Guild. That's coming up in June. It's work gathered from women all over the world, and it's really quite remarkable. So I'll let you know. I just can't remember all the things that are coming up.
Please, it can always live on our website,
Yes,
under this particular session. So that's great. And just to repeat myself, my piece will be in the book, If Black Hair Can Talk, next month. And that's by Carla Sparks, who's been a guest on Messy Conversation in the past. So it has music playlist, poetry, and it will also have some chronicles about Black women and Black men in this world, with their experiences in hair. So it should be quite interesting. I can't wait. So that said, we wish everyone adieu until next time at the same bat channel.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
everyone.
guys so much. Thank you.